Evening everybody, welcome to my weekly Facebook Live. Join me every Wednesday evening at 8:30 and I will put together a few cards for you. Tonight I am using items from the Ornate Garden suite and we're going to recreate these two cards. So I put a little message out earlier just to see what people wanted, and someone mentioned watercolouring, so I've done that on this card. And then I've tried to create a really simple design here but with a few of the new dies. So I'm looking forward to getting going with you all. We'll just wait for a few people to join. For those of you that don't know, the Ornate Garden suite is brand new in the annual catalogue that comes out in June, but it has been released early and it's really exciting because it's such a beautiful suite. There's something for everybody, and I love the dies, so I'm excited to show those to you tonight. Thanks everyone for joining. I hope you're all okay. Evening to Hilary. Hi to Trisha. Evening Bev. Okay, so let's get cracking. So I'm going to put this one together first. The colours that this suite coordinates with are really bright, and I have struggled to use them, so I've tried to do something a bit different for you tonight. I've used a bit of watercolour and I'm using Pool Party, which is such a beautiful aqua blue colour, and I've used some of these dies here. So let's get started. So for this particular card, so these are the dies, some of the dies here. These are the Ornate Layers dies, and they are really handy dies. There's lots of different patterns, lots of different sizes, and some of them are over there as well. So you will see them as we go along tonight. So to start with, I'll just move that over there. I've got a few different pieces to make this card. I've got a scrap of black, which is for the thank you in the middle. I've got a piece of the Fluid 100 watercolour paper, and that measures, I'm just measuring it on my grid paper, 8 centimetres by 12 centimetres. I have, just measuring it here, this piece is for the inside of our card, which measures 10 by 14.4, and then this one here is a piece of scrap white. It actually measures 14.9 by 14.9 by 10.5 centimetres, and we're going to use that to cut this die out of. And then I have my card base. So we'll start by cutting out this lovely die. So I'm just going to pop it on my big shot, which is behind me. I'm not going to bring it into screen because it will make the camera wobble, and we don't want that, do we? So I'm quickly just going to run that through. I could have cut these beforehand, but hey ho, we live and we learn. So let's just check that that's cut. I'm just going to run it through once more. These dies are quite intricate. So I always find to run it through once or twice just to check that that is cut properly. So that's all been cut. So now we just peel that away. And actually this edge piece, I really like it. You could use that as on another card, so I may very well do that. So we'll just pop this out of there. And you can see it's cut out all those little dots. So I'm just going to use my die brush to get rid of those little dots, and I don't really want to do it over my desk, but you'll get the effect. So some of these we might have to pop out with our scissors. Some are a bit stubborn. This is an old die brush that I'm using, and we do actually have an attachment that goes on our pick tool, which is really handy. This is on my desk, so we're using this. I'm just going around, just trying to pop out those stubborn bits, and it looks like it's now snowed on my desk. So then for those stubborn bits, I'm just going to quickly pop those out. I should have done this earlier, shouldn't I? There we go. Hi to the people that are just hopping on now. Thanks so much for coming on, do say hi. We've got a few people on this evening. You can see Baz, you've just said missing you, I miss you too. Okay, so that's most of those pieces, if not all of them. It's down on this corner. It does look like it's snowed on my desk. Wouldn't snow be the worst right now? Evening, Leslie. I hope you're keeping safe and well. Nearly there, home stretch now, guys. Evening, Jacqueline. It's lovely of all of you to say hi. Otherwise I feel like I'm talking to myself sometimes. Right, last little pieces. Okay, there we are. So let's just move all the snowy bits off my desk. So now we have that. This piece of Fluid 100 paper, actually I've cut it down so that it fits inside this die piece here. So we're going to start to do some watercolouring, which is the fun part. So you'll see on here I haven't stamped in black, I've actually heat embossed this. So let's do that now. So to heat emboss onto watercolour paper, you just do exactly the same thing. We're going to rub our embossing buddy just across the whole of the card. And then we can use our Versamark. So the embossing buddy, it just removes all the static off the card, so it gives you much more of a crisper finish. And then for this piece, we're going to stamp off of our card. So all I'm doing is I'm lining this up roughly with the edge, sorry, the bottom corner. And you can't really see that at all. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to get my little pot of embossing powder and just dip that in. So all I've done with this is I've decanted my embossing powder into this Tupperware container. I just find it's a lot easier to control. And I've just smudged that. And then into the top right hand corner we're going to just stamp again. Oh, excuse me ladies, I've got a sneeze. Oh, excuse me again. Okay, so then we're just going to add a bit more of this in the top corner. Like so, and then repeat into our embossing powder. There we go. So we've just got a little bit on the top corner and the bottom corner. Let's pop that in my trolley down there. And then all I'm doing is I'm bringing in my heat tool, and all I'm going to do is I'm just going to heat this so that the embossing powder sets. Thank you ladies, saying bless you. So you'll just see that will start to, you should see it, it will start to set. Yeah, so it's just starting to go now. So I'm not sure if that is picking it up on the camera. You can see it's going glossy, and that means that the powder is fully set and it won't smudge. There we go, nearly there on that particular one. So it is quite tricky to see once it's done, but it's such a nice effect. And sometimes you don't want that stark black. Okay, so there we have our heat embossed image. Just trying to get rid of all those little white dots. We have our heat embossed image, so you can just see that there. Now we can start to watercolour. So I'm going to use Pool Party, and all I'm doing is I'm squeezing the ink pad. This is an old ink pad, so they're a lot easier to squeeze, but I'm just squeezing it so that when I open it, the ink has transferred from the pad onto the lid. and I can then use this as my paint palette. Okay, so just pop that there, and then I'm going to, just using a spritzer, a stamping spritzer, all I'm going to do is I'm just going to spray the card where I'm going to be doing my watercolouring, just so that there's a little bit of water already on there. I find it makes blending a lot easier. So now I've just got some water. Okay, so I'm just going to pick up some of that ink, and to start with I'm going to colour the flowers. So I actually want it quite diluted. So then what you find is the area that you've embossed, if you're careful, the ink will stay within that area, which is what we want. So embossing onto watercolour paper is a great technique if you're going to be doing some colour. This would work really well with blends as well if you were to do it on Whisper white paper. Blends wouldn't work so well on the watercolour paper because they're alcohol based. So what I'm doing to start with is I'm giving all the flowers a nice base of the diluted Pool Party, and then what I do once I've given them all a good base is I then go in and add the shading. So it's just picking up all that lovely detail. Isn't that pretty? If you need a bit more water, just pick a bit more up on your brush. That's it. Sometimes it's quite hard to see where you've been, where you need to go. So that's that. Oh, there's some flower, there's a leaf there, petal there even. And then now we'll just go up the top. I want a bit more water. Evening, Mum. Mum's just hopped on. There's quite a bit of water there now. Okay. So there we have our first layer of watercolouring. Someone's just asked a question, could you do this on Whisper White card? So I would advise not doing it on Whisper White card because Whisper White isn't watercolour card. It's not very porous, so you don't get a great finish and it won't blend very well. So I would always advise using the watercolour paper. So now what I'm doing is I'm adding a bit more detail, and all I've done is I've picked up the ink that hasn't been watered down, and I haven't added any more water to my brush. So I'm just adding in some shading on those inner petals. What I also love about watercolouring, you never get the same effect, same picture twice. Well, I don't anyway. Okay, so I'm just picking up a bit more of the ink rather than the water to just add in that shading. Can you see that? Yeah. It will look better once it's dry, I promise. And I want to leave these little flowers here quite plain. One of those things that you have to say to yourself, nope, that's it, that's enough, and stop. Or you could just keep going. Or I could anyway. Okay. Just a bit just there. And this paper is really fast drying as well, so because I've not put a lot of water on, the ink is really drying nicely. Whereas the one I did the other day, we actually had to dry it with a heat tool. It's because I'd put so much water on it. And we were doing lots of different layering. So there we have that one there. And now we'll just go back to our flower at the top and just repeat the same level of detail. So I'm happy with those flowers there. So we can shut our Pool Party ink pad, and now I'm going to use some smoky slate. So again, just give the ink pad a really good squeeze. These new ink pads are a lot firmer, so there we are. It's picked up a good amount of ink. And then again, I want to really dilute this down. So I'm adding a fair amount of water. And then the leaves are going to be grey, so I'm just repeating that nice wash of colour to start with, to pick up the pattern. I went for grey because I do love Pool Party with grey. I think it looks really smart. And just pick up those stems if you can. Yeah. So that's to start with. And again, if you wanted to add a bit more detail, all you do is you pick up some of the ink that hasn't got a lot of water in it. So you see this bit here has been really diluted and this bit here hasn't. So I'm just picking up some of the ink that hasn't and then just taking it back to my leaf and adding in the shading that way. Okay. And then just when I'm happy with it, I will stop. And then there's two little leaves up here, so again just pick up that nice diluted ink for that initial wash of colour. That's it. And then pick up more of the undiluted ink for that shading. Okay, so that is my watercolouring done. So you can see that I've left these little flowers quite light, shall I say, and I've just added the colour, the shading to the larger flowers. So there we have our heat embossed piece, not heat embossed and watercoloured piece. I'm just going to move my watercolour before I knock it flying, which I have been known to do. So now we can, still a little bit wet, so what I'll do is I'll just add these pieces to the card whilst I'm waiting for that to dry. So we've just got a card base here. Card base is a standard C6 card base, so it's half a piece of A4, and I've used thick Whisper White. So this we're going to add on there, but I'm not going to stick it down flat. I want to use some dimensionals. So dimensionals are here. So what I'm actually going to use, because this is quite a large piece, I don't necessarily want to use lots of little hexagons. I'm going to peel off this edge here. So we always like to use all the pieces of the dimensionals, nothing goes to waste. And then the same this side, I'm just going to give that a little snip. There we go. Just pull that off like so, and then that piece can go down that side, and then I'm just going to add one in the middle. Peel off the backing. Like so, and then we're going to pop this in the centre of our card. So it's quite nice. Now it's a bit more raised, you just get a little bit of a better effect, and then this we can stick straight down. Okay, so for that I'm just going to use some Tombow, my trusty glue. I'm just going to go around the edge. You don't need much at all. And then that gets stuck in the centre of that die cut piece. Okay, so that's that stuck down. I think that looks quite sweet just like that. So for our thank you, I've actually used this die here to cut that panel out, you'll see if you look slightly, I don't know if the camera will pick that up, you can see it's got the stitching around the edge. So it's just another bit of detail to your card. I always find the trick with something like this, because there's not much space around it, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to stamp and heat emboss it first. That way we get a better finish when we die cut. It'll be just my luck that it will be wonky if I did it the other way around. So I'm just taking our embossing buddy and running that across the black cardstock. That picks up any static that you may have, and you get a crisper image when you finish. So now we're going to take the stamp to the Versamark. Versamark is a sticky ink pad, so anything, we need the embossing powder to stick to it. So I'm just going to stamp this in the middle of this card. Push down nice and firm, but be careful not to move the stamp. You don't want a shadow on your stamping. So you'll see, I'll just hold that up to the camera, you can just about see that you've got a bit of a sticky residue there. So then all we do, bring our embossing powder back in. So this is white embossing powder, and they come in smaller pots. All I've done is I've decanted it into a bigger tub because it's a lot easier. And then I'm just going to pick that embossing powder up, give it a bit of a tap. And that will get rid of any excess. Now, one thing on here, if you do have any excess that you want to get rid of, just use a paintbrush. Just wipe that off. Okay. And then we'll just bring in our heat tool. So you can see that embossing powder on there now. We use the heat tool just to set that. Hopefully you'll see this as it changes. It's a lot easier to see on black. So can you see that it's just starting to go? It's getting brighter. So effective. So that there is all nice and set now. So if I hold that up to the camera, you can see that's just gone a bit glossy and it looks nice and bright. So now we can use our die and cut this out. So I've just added some washi tape. The reason I've added some washi tape is because I don't want it to move when I run it through the big shot. So I'm just lining that up, and this does fit really nicely inside this die. It's one of the great things about this suite, everything coordinates beautiful. So this is comes from the Thank You stamp set, the Ornate Thanks, which is part of the bundle. So I've used this one here. So all I'm doing now is I'm going to run that through my big shot, which I will do behind me. Got my little trolley set up behind me. Works quite well. Okay, so that's just fallen out of the die, which is great. So this is the piece that we've just die cut. So it's made it nice and straight for us, and you can see if I hold it up to the camera, you've just got that lovely stitching around the edge. So it's really pretty. So we can now bring our card back in. So our card, I'm just going to add this thank you to the centre. And I'm just going to stick that on with some Tombow. I'm going to pop that roughly about there. So I'm just lining it up with the edge of the die to make sure that's in the centre. And just push down really lightly. Just seeing some more comments pop up. Hi Melissa, you're joining from Wisconsin. Wow, amazing. And Jackie, hi. Thank you Tracy, that's really kind. Tracy said stunning. Thank you very much. So there we have our heat embossed and watercoloured card. to finish, I'm going to add some of these holiday rhinestones, which are in my little pot. Now, so this is all I have left of the pool party colour. These come from the holiday rhinestones pack, where you get, I think there's 5 different colours in there, and they're really handy. So I'm just going to peel these off, and I'm sticking these in the centre of a few of these little flowers, just to bring out some of that detail. So I'm going to put one there, one there, one there, and this one I've used a different part of the stamp card that we've done tonight, so I'm just going to pop one up there as well. So just a little bit of sparkle, which I think brings that card alive really nicely. So now I can turn that into light. You can really see that shine of that heat embossing that we've done on that watercolour paper, and all the details being picked up really nicely. So the last thing for this card is just to add our piece inside. The front of the card feels quite heavy, so I always like to balance it out a bit with another layer inside. So this is just a piece of Whisper White that I've cut down, and it measures 10 centimetres by 14.4 centimetres, which is actually ½ centimetre smaller than the front of the card, to keep it quite straightforward. ½ centimetre is usually what I use for my mats and my layering when I'm doing cards. Okay, so I'm going to leave that quite plain. I don't really want to add anything inside. Oh, Marion, thank you, that's really kind. Katrina, you do need to collect the ink pads. They are good ink pads. I've been really, really pleased. So this one here, this is Pool Party. I've had this ink pad for 6.5 years, and I've re-inked it a few times, but if you were to see how much is actually left in the re-inker, I've not inked it much. And I've used them for classes as well, so they do hold their ink quite well. And I do love the fact you can use them to paint with as well. So there is card number 1 for you. So this is my original that I did about an hour ago, and this is the one we've done together. All that's different is there is a different part of the Stamp Up there that I've used, and we've got plain inside. Before I move on to the other card, I'll just go over this stamp set for you. So this stamp set, what you can, it's got lots of follow-ons from your thanks. So for example, from the bottom of my heart, thanks for everything. So I could, if I wanted to, add in one of those inside, but I am going to leave it plain. Okay, so that is our finished card number 1 this evening. I hope you liked it. Evening Denise, you're just joining us. We've made our first card. We've got some watercolouring and some heat embossing there for that one, and then on to our second card. So I'm just going to pop that up out of the way. Our second card. So I'm using a bit more of the dies for you and a few little techniques with these dies. So this one here, it's quite plain, quite simple, but there is actually quite a lot going on there. So what we need is, we have a card base. So this is the other half of the card base, of their piece of A4 that I cut to make my card bases. So folding my card like so, just running my bone fold along the edge. Now before we stick our layers together, I'm actually going to put the cards together beforehand. So I'm going to move my card base out of the way. So this piece measures the same as the previous card. This is 10 centimetres by 14.4, and that is our top layer. So I'm just going to grab a new blend because this one is an old one. Is it light or is it dark? It's dark. Okay. So for this one, I'm going to create this wash effect in the background with a stamping blend. So this is a dark Pool Party shade. Baz mentioned it earlier, to watercolour on the Whisper White card, it's really smooth, it's not porous at all, so you wouldn't get a great finish. But to create a bit of a wash, you can use the stamping blends. So I'm using the colouring end, I would say, and all I'm doing is I'm just going to colour. So this one is a lot darker than the other one. hey ho. So I'm just going to do something a bit like that. It looks a bit scruffy, but it will be covered, so we don't need much more. Now, these are the 2 dies that I've used. So these 2 dies come with the other pack in the suite. These are the Ornate border dies, so you get quite a few in this pack. And I've used this one here, and I've cut some black card. So actually, all I've done is I've lined that up on a scrap piece of black card and cut the whole strip out, and then I've cut it in half. So half I've used for this card, and I'm going to use the other half for this. I'm just going to get rid of all those pieces there that need to come out. I've now got black and white snow on my desk. So the stubborn pieces I'm just popping out with my paper snips. These are nice and sharp, so they do the job well. Okay. So there we have the black pieces cut out. And then this die here is where this piece down here has come from. So I'm just lining it up. What piece have I used? That piece. Yes. So I've cut a whole strip of that out, used from the pool party cardstock, and I've cut it in half. So I want to trim this down because that's quite a lot there. Or should I use the whole piece? Because there's quite a lot going on there. There's 2 flowers. Actually, we'll leave that like it is, but we'll turn it that way. Okay, so we're going to use that whole piece there and this piece here, but we're not going to cut that down yet. So for my sentiment, I'm using this die here. This comes from the Stitched So Sweetly dies. They're in the January to June mini catalogue, and they are carrying over, which is lovely. So I'm just going to run this through my Big Shot. I'm just using a scrap piece of Whisper White. So this will just pop out nicely. So that's got a lovely stitching around the edge, which is really effective. It just brings something else. So you could actually pop that on the card like that, but I've used it that way. So to start with, we're going to stamp our sentiment. So this says, "Your friendship means the world to me." This comes from the Free as a Bird stamp set. I'm just moving some of these dies out of the way. So I'm going to stamp this in black, using black memento. So I'm just going to stamp that in the middle, like so. Lovely. It's a bit wonky, but hey ho, it's handmade. So now we've done that, I'm going to use this lovely edgelet die, and I'm going to stick it to here. So I'm lining it up with the top. You see that? And I'm just making sure there's an equal amount of space between the edge of the die and those first row of holes there. So I just want to move it out a little bit. Okay, so we're going to line it up so that that part and that part, so there's no gap between the white piece and the black piece. So to stick that down, I'm literally just going to put some glue on here. A trusty Tombow. There we go. Okay, that's better. So if I'd put it in a bit further, you would have lost this detail here. So then now we've done that, we're going to use our paper snips and snip it off at the top and at the bottom, like so. So it's just a little bit of an extra detail there. So then now we can go ahead and we can pop this on our card. So I'm going to stick that about there. And this one is being stuck on flat, so bring in a little bit more Tombow. This So I'm moving that over a bit more to the left hand side because this die is a little bit bigger. Okay, so then we can go ahead and we can stick this down. So this one is being stuck down flat. There we go. I'm just putting the glue on these larger pieces. And then this can be stuck on like so. So I'm just pushing down on roughly where that glue will be. Now, as part of these dies as well, you get these little flowers, which are super handy. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut these out. So I've got a bit of pool party, bit of scrap. I'm going to cut all three out, just laying them on my card, and I'm going to run that through my big shop. So these dies are designed to line up in that edgelet that we've used. So let's just pop these out. I can guarantee by the time I finish with these dies, I would have misplaced one of them, so I'm just going to pop them back in my pot. So these dies here actually fit in to the shape like so. Can you see that? So there is our edgelet that we've stuck down. That comes from this die. And these are the extra flower dies. So they actually fit in like so. See that? So they're really handy and they're really cute. I love them. I'm going to add a bit of shape to them. So all I'm going to do is, do I have something round? I do have something round on my desk. Here he is. So I'm using the end of this pen and I'm just pushing them down to shape them a bit. Okay, and the same with this little one and this one. So let's mount these together. So for that we need some glue dots. So these are the glue dots. You'll see that they are all on the roll there. So for this one, this is the large one. I'm going to pick that glue dot up. And then this can go. Let's just make sure I'm lining that up as we should. So that goes about there. And I'm going to pop this small one in the centre as well. I haven't worried too much about popping those little dots out because we're going to cover it up with the gem. And then this one here. That can go on there like so. So it just adds a little bit more detail to your card, a bit of depth, and then we're going to add those little glue dots, those little gems in the centre. So these holiday rhinestones, you get two sizes. You get small ones and you get big ones. So I'm going to use a big one for this one here. And they actually cover up those three little dots quite nicely. And then for the smaller one, I'm just going to use one of these little ones. Okay. So there we have, it's coming together now. So you'll see on this one there are a few little black dots. I have added those dots using this pen. So this is one of our black journaling pens. They come in a pack of 2 and you have a 0.5 which is the width of that dot there, or you get a 0.1 which is a lot finer. This is probably the one I use the most, and I'm just adding those little black dots with this pen. I'm just dotting them on. Okay, you don't have to do that, but it just adds a little bit something else to the card. And then we now need to mount that layer onto our card front. So I'm doing that again with a bit of Tombow. So this card, although it looks a lot simpler, there's still a lot going on with it. There's a lot of die cutting. There's quite a bit of precision. And then for this one, there should be a piece for the middle, but I haven't cut it out. So let's just grab that. So for our middle piece, just bringing my trimmer in. It's on my desk behind me. So because this card is double layered on the front, it feels quite flimsy in the back now. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to add in another layer. So this is a piece of Whisper White. So I'm cutting it so it measures 10 centimetres by 14.4 centimetres. So this is the piece that we need. And all I'm doing with that is I'm sticking that inside in the same way. So again, I'm leaving this one nice and blank inside. You can add something if you want to. I usually do, but for these ones, I'm leaving them blank. What I would probably do is I would just add another little wash down there, maybe with one of those flowers. Okay. So there are our, that was my sample one before this evening, before the live, and this is the one I've used. So this die piece here is the whole piece. So it's actually quite big to use on one card, which is why you'll see that I've cut that down. Okay, so that's card number 2 for you, all finished tonight. Thank you so much for watching. So for those of you that weren't here at the beginning, this is the first card that we put together. So I've used some heat embossing in white on some watercolour paper. We've watercoloured that in with a water brush and just some ink from the lid of our ink pad. We've used one of the layers dies from the Ornate Garden suite to mount that onto. We've added that to our card, and then we've heat embossed this lovely thank you in the middle and added it to a piece of black in the middle. And then lastly is the one that you've just seen me make. So thank you so much for watching this evening. I've really loved spending some time with you all. I will be back here on Wednesday evening next week at 8:30. And if all of these, in about half an hour, I'll have everything up on my blog for you, so you'll be able to see all the products that I've used. If you did want to place an order, Stampin Up are still shipping. Orders are delayed by about 5-6 days, but they are still getting through. I'm really excited. I have my pre-order of the annual catalogue coming on Friday, so watch out for some brand new product coming your way next week. Thanks so much for tuning in, everyone. Have a lovely week, and I look forward to seeing you very soon. Take care. Bye.